The Bank of Ghana has revoked the licenses of 386 insolvent microfinance and microcredit companies in the latest phase of the cleanup of the sector, which has already seen the takeover of 7 banks. The list includes 192 microfinance companies whose licenses have been revoked. Another 155 insolvent companies that are not operational have also had their licenses revoked. The central bank, in a press release Friday, also announced it has revoked the licenses of 29 insolvent microcredit companies. BOG explained that regarding the microfinance companies, it took the action pursuant to Section 123, that's Section 1 of the Banks and Specialized Deposit-Taking Institutions Act 2016, Act 930, which requires the central bank to revoke the license of a bank or specialized deposit-taking institution where it determines that the institution is insolvent or is likely to become insolvent within the next 60 days. The Bank of Ghana has consequently appointed Eric Nipa as receiver for the specified institutions in line with Section 123, subsection 2 of Act 930. Joining me in studio now is Philip Namfuri, an analyst and researcher with Joy Business, to explain what this all means. Thank you very much, Philip. Now, I first want you to take us through the list of affected companies.
Okay, so looking at the list, Bank of Ghana broke it down into microfinance institutions. They come under Tier 2, and then the microcredits that come under Tier 3. So I'm sure we've put them together to make it simple for our viewers and listeners. First one, we have Allied Wealth Money Lending Limited, Bennett Money Lending Limited, Bremco Money Lending Company Limited, Calmad Money Lending Company Limited, Catamount Finance Money Lending Limited, Citizens Money Lending Limited, Divine Announcement Money Lending Limited. We also have Great Africa Money Lending Limited. We have Hatmag Money Lending Limited, Hobens Money Lending Limited, Index Money Lending Limited, KAF Investment Money Lending Limited, KBN Money Lending Limited, KYC Money Lending Limited, Makotli, very important name there, Money Lending Limited, NNJ Money Lending Limited, Obrapa Money Lending Limited. So you see that the list goes on and on. And the reason why there's money lending added is because they're the microcredit ones. Right. Next one's one-to-one money lending services, Limited Orbit Money Lending Company Limited, Pitsy Ways Money Lenders Limited, PMAG Investments Money Lending Services Limited, SAT Finance Money Lending Limited, Shamar Capital Money Lending Limited, SNJ Money Lending Limited, Unifocus Money Lending Limited, Zeta Money Lending Limited.
And it turns out that there are several notable ones also amongst the list that was released by the Bank of Ghana. And we'll be coming to some of those ones in a bit. So where we see any of the significant, well, the notable ones, then we'd want to have a conversation about them. But that's what we have on the screen right now. But are there any notable ones that are actually come to your attention?
Okay, so from the reading I just did, it was Makotli I was surprised by, because, you know, they have a holding company where they have different subsidiaries, and they've come in the news a couple of times.
Yes,
for inability to pay back their depositors' funds. But if you look at it, Israel, notable or unnotable, because some of the names I see, they're very interesting names.
Yeah.
Names that you will not relate with on a daily basis. Names that you will not want to pin to a financial service institution. But it just goes back to the genesis of this issue, where Bank of Ghana saw the importance of microfinance institutions. There was a lax licensing regime for these institutions. And then all of a sudden, this ballooned out of control, or spiraled out of control.
How many do we have at the moment?
Okay, so right now, if you look at it, they've revoked in total almost 400. But previously, I'll start from the beginning. Previously, we had over 500. There was some cleanup. We brought it down to about 483, if I'm right. Now we've cut it down again to north of 190 companies. And one will ask the question, is it still a lot for microfinance, or is it the right number? Because with the 400s and 500s, Bank of Ghana was so overwhelmed by the numbers that it had to create another department.
Just
the other financial services.
Scrutinize and supervise their work.
And even with that, there were still problems.
All right. Philip, now one of the questions most customers, I'm sure, watching us right now would want to know is, are the investments safe, or are the deposits safe? And are they going to have access to them, as happened in the case of the banks?
Okay, so with this, Bank of Ghana takes any action with the depositors in mind. They are the important part of the financial institutions. So everything they do will be to ensure that if you had money in these institutions, after a process of verification is conducted, then you are made whole. So you may have access to your funds. But let's bear in mind that with the banking sector one, if you remember from the receivership process, it wasn't immediate. You're not going to get your funds immediately. You know, we had GCB taking over Capital Bank in UT. So when you walk into a bank of GCB as a former UT Capital customer, you're able to have access to your funds. But with this, we don't see anything of a purchase and assumption or microfinance institutions going under others.
They have not been taking over.
Exactly. So I'm sure their assets are going to be liquidated, the ones that have had their licenses revoked or declared insolvent. And then anybody in there, depositors, creditors, that's anybody who has given money to these institutions, will be made whole. And we should ensure and keep our eyes peeled for this process to ensure that it's done smoothly, it's done credibly. Because there was some news that the banking one was not up to scratch, if I can say so. So we should ensure that this one is done smoothly, it's done properly, so that you and I can be made whole.
But what do you anticipate is going to happen? Because I can imagine that the people who would have gotten the announcement now, and I believe they're going to storm the branches or these micro finance companies to try to retrieve their funds, even though at this point it will be too late. Don't you foresee a situation where there may be violent seizures of properties of these banks?
Okay, for now, I wouldn't see that, but I would see a certain level of panic in there, because it's not everybody, even with the banking sector issues, there were some who decided that, okay, you know what, Bank of Ghana has its hand over everything, let me sit back, observe. Some also rushed to the banking halls trying to get everything, and it brought about this panic where anybody who had funds in the financial institution became a bit doubtful, because you don't know the state tomorrow. So with regards to liquidation, I would say let's see what the receiver does with the process.
All right.
But from the investor perspective or the customer's perspective, I expect some panic a bit. But again, Bank of Ghana assures us that all is well and good, and that's why they've taken these measures to ensure that in the long run, there's some stability in the financial sector.
Can we anticipate the revocation of further or additional licenses of the microcredit companies and microfinance companies?
I would not discount that, Israel, because we saw with the banking sector in 2017 when the UT Capital went down, we were asking questions that we will see more. And then in August of the following year, just like that, we had 5 go down, and it happened again. So there has been a cleanup. The number has been whittled down, but I won't be shocked if I see tomorrow, next week, another bunch of companies have been removed.
All right. And we'll be having further analysis on this, on the business segment, which comes up in just about 18 minutes with Sandra Afenu. Sandra Afenu actually will be speaking with Professor Bokping, I believe. Yeah. So do stay tuned in. We'll be looking at the implications on the entire sector as it is. But it also has to be stated that some of these companies, it turns out that 155 of these microfinance and microcredit companies were actually already insolvent. And so it was 192 of the microfinance companies that were actually in operation that had their licenses revoked. All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Philip Namfuri. And Philip Namfuri is an analyst and researcher here at Joy Business. Now, moving on.